Welcome back, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Just move that up there. There you go. It's my pleasure to invite to the stage for a little fireside chat, casual conversation, Joe Campanelli and Jason Wild. Jason is the chairman of TerrAscend, executive chairman of TerrAscend, the chairman of the board TerrAscend, and the CIO of JW Asset Management, which is about a $500 million fund. And we're going to talk to Jason about his journey into cannabis. TerrAscend is truly one of the leading MSOs and one of the best operating MSOs in the country. And we're going to hear about how he's maintained it at the top of the pack. And it's a very exciting story and journey. Joe Campanelli is the CEO and chairman of Needham Bank. Joe and I go back, we're going to age ourselves probably 30 years in the banking industry. We've actually worked together off and on at various lending institutions that Joe has been a senior executive or has run. Back in, was it 1997, you were CEO of Sovereign? And then went on to Flagstar Bank, built them up. And in 2017, which is, I believe, the same year that you took over TerrAscend, Joe became the CEO and chairman of Needham Bank. And Needham Bank, when he took it over, was about $1.9 billion. Today, it's over $4 billion in asset. And Joe is leading Needham Bank into the cannabis industry over the last several years, and we're going to hear about his journey. So, Jason, let's talk about your entry into cannabis back in 2017. I know you were in the pharmaceuticals business before then. TerrAscend is in 5 states today. They're in California, Maryland, Michigan, Pennsylvania, New Jersey. Talk about how you got into the space and how did you target those states? And let's talk about today's platform, then we'll talk about later on in the program about where you see the expansion opportunities.
Sure, absolutely. And first of all, thank you for having me here. This event has been awesome so far.
Let's keep it that way.
Yeah. Right, no pressure. But I actually started investing in the cannabis space in 2014 in Canada. We had just had, in my fund, we just had a big liquidity event with our drug company, Arbor. And right around that time, I got a call from a banker up in Canada saying that they just legalized medical cannabis in Canada. I've always been a fan of cannabis, and I was invited to come up and see the cultivation facility. I'd never seen one. Went up there, was bitten by the bug, where I was like, my view was this is going to be huge. I looked at it as being pharmaceuticals, just the only part of pharmaceuticals that I felt like was going to grow significantly over the next 10 to 20 years. So I spent the next 2 or so years zigzagging across Canada, meeting as many private companies as I could. There were no public ones yet, and we invested some of those proceeds from that liquidity event in the Canadian cannabis space. And luckily, we bet on some of the right ones. We had 5 main investments. Our biggest investment was in Canopy, which this is before Constellation invested. We were like 5th largest shareholder in Canopy, and Kronos was another big position of ours. So, and what happened was in 2017, I felt like there was an opportunity. We had done pretty well in those investments, but I felt like there was an opportunity to sort of do what we had done with Arbor, our drug company, do that again, and go out and build a company that we felt could be one of the leaders in the cannabis space. At first, we only operated in Canada, which is all those other investments were only in Canada or only in legal jurisdictions, not in the US. But 6 months after we did that change of control transaction into TerrAscend in late 17, about 6 months later, we decided that we had to go to the US. The market wasn't going to be big enough in Canada, in our view, to support profitability and all of that. And that's what got us here. We're in California, Michigan, New Jersey, Maryland, and Pennsylvania.
And how did you target initially those
states? So it's a sort of there's not necessarily a set flow chart of like if this then this, but generally I've got in my head like which states are more attractive or less attractive based upon a combination of the market size and whether it's already rec, whether it's medical, whether rec is coming soon, things like that. We look at sort of the states that are already rec and have been there for a while. We look at them as sort of as the most mature of the states, and not that there can't be a good business in those states, but there's even more opportunity if you have the same sets of skills and you're in states that are a little, that are just turning rec or are still medical, and maybe rec's coming in even within the next 2 years. We just feel like that there's more upside there. And I said it's all in my head. It's the whole team, the whole BD and M&A team at TerrAscend. We're all sort of on the same page of what where we think the big opportunities are. A big part of the way we've done things is we've approached it from the beginning that we wanted to be deep and not wide, because I feel like people in finance think that that you can just add on unlimited states and it's all the same ease to operate it and you're going to do just as well. And I think we've had the humility over the last 5 years to say that we can't be in too many places at once, especially when you're competing with mom and pops that are operating in that state and they know what's going on, a lot quicker than a lot of these operators that are in 20 different places. So there's just a lot to. We look at it as like, if we're going to add another state, it's got to really clear a high bar. We'd much prefer to add to the places where we can, where we're not up against the caps, like in places like Michigan. But even in terms of all those markets, I'll just call out Michigan because it might not seem to fit with the others like Pennsylvania, Maryland, and New Jersey. But our view was that in Michigan, even though it's an unlimited licensed state, that's the advantage is that there are no license caps. So you get things right in Michigan, which we have started getting them much more right in the last couple of quarters. You get it right in Michigan, and you could have 150 stores. Whereas, like, no matter how great we do in Maryland, we can't have more than 4. And in Jersey, there's 3. We have an ability to own a piece of up to another 7. But Michigan is, to us, we have to make Michigan work because overall the market is looking at the space and they're saying, oh, it's great that you're making all this money in New Jersey or in Maryland, but they're all going to turn into Michigan. So we have to show, and we're in the process of doing it right now, that we can do well, and we are doing well in states that are more competitive, in my view, than that actually affords or should afford a higher multiple on the states that are shooting the lights out with unbelievable growth, because they know that it's not all going away.
So if you stick with your current platform, talk about California.
Yep.
Your views on California, because you're really not expanding in California.
Yep.
And you've mentioned to me you might want to get rid of those assets.
Gosh, between us, that was like lawyer-client privilege or something. Yeah, California was our first entry into the U.S. I mentioned back in 2018 when we decided we had that we were going to go into the U.S. We knew we were giving up the ability to be able to uplist to the TSX or even to the U.S. exchanges, but we decided, we made that decision, and California was a huge market. It was we didn't at that point. This was like 2017 when we started really looking closely. Like these markets on the East Coast, there were barely any examples of companies or at least I wasn't coming across them until I think maybe 2018 in terms of coming across them. There were some big Massachusetts operators and Pennsylvania and all that. But originally, the markets were so much bigger on the West Coast, and it was sort of, maybe it's, not great to do tops-down math and say, this is a $5 billion market. If we can get X% of it, and then if we have these margins, it'll all work. I mean, in retrospect, California has not. To me, it's like it's the largest state in sales, but how much gross profit or how much profit is in those dollars? Like practically nothing. I'd much rather be in a state that has a smaller overall market size, and we learned this over time. You know, I heard earlier everybody was talking about how you have to learn and adapt in this industry, but we learned over time that a smaller market, you know, or just we essentially look at the size of the market secondary to what is the size of the profit pool out there? How many gross profit dollars do we think are in that state?
Okay, thank you. So, Joe, been in the banking business
A while.
and at Needham, you started. Tell us about when you started to look at the cannabis industry, and there's a number of banks in the audience today, and what it was like to get buy-in internally, you know, with your board, with your team, with your customer base, and then we'll talk about the Century deal. But let's talk about.
Great. No, it's interesting, Frank. It's just my whole career in banking. We always found ways to. The color of our money is the same color as everyone else's, right? So we try to make ours a little more greener by understanding specific industries and specific opportunities. We've done a lot in the auto finance business, a lot in commercial real estate, obviously. Looked at a bunch of different niches. We love the startup world. You know, we love to watch people grow things and develop companies and whatnot. Early in my career, we did startups like Green Mountain Coffee, Crabtree and Evelyn, you know, different types of companies that started very small and grew into major companies. When we looked at cannabis, we said, well, geez, it's here. A lot of our real estate developers are finding themselves tenants that you have indirect exposure to it. We've been watching the industry mature over time. I spent 2 or 3 trips out to Colorado, you know, the longest recreational medical market around, going back probably 2017, 18. And started thinking that this is a major industry. It's legal. It should be banked and banked with care. And approach it the same way we approach every other industry we looked at. We study it. We go deep into it. We understand the opportunities. How do we differentiate ourselves and add value? And we're all very much relationship driven. We have a tendency to really bet on the jockey and not so much the horse. So we really looked at the types of people coming into the industry. And it's remarkable how many people were very successful in other industries and other businesses that are now moving into the cannabis industry. That was really intriguing. So we went through and did our homework on it. We started our dialogue with our regulators early on. I don't like surprises, so I don't feel our regulators want the surprises either. So we really laid out a 3 to 5 year strategic plan. Here's where we are, here's where we're going. We knew in 2017 when I came to Needham, it had a great foundation. It was known as the Builders Bank. We just want to build more things.
Now it's known as the Bud Bank, by the
way. Well, it's better than Needham, but I want to keep promoting that brand, right? Because it is an industry that's got a lot of potential, a lot of challenges, but like any other startup. So we looked at it, we did our homework.
How long would you say before Century Bank you guys spent vetting the industry?
Oh, at least 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah, and really understanding the regulatory environment, what was going on, how the capital structure in the industry was maturing. We started to go de novo and building our team, and then some lawyer friend of mine said that, hey, we think Century Bank's going to divest, and which was a phenomenal opportunity because we had already...
For those in the audience, he is referring to me.
See, I have client privilege. I don't tell everybody everything, right?
So that was in April 2022, and for those who aren't familiar with the Century situation, so Century Bank was really the first bank in Massachusetts to bank the cannabis industry. GFA became the first to bank adult use, and then Century got into it. Eastern Bank bought Century Bank, and for some reason didn't want the cannabis business. Joe and I had been talking about cannabis for several years, and I called Joe and I said, I think there's an opportunity to take this over. CEOs met.
That was great. Most importantly, as I said earlier, we're a relationship company, and Paul Evangelista and his team brought to the table hundreds of years of experience. They had been through multiple regulatory reviews by the FDIC and by the Department of Banking, and had a good model that was well vetted. We brought some capabilities to the table on the technology side, on the lending side, and married the two together. But going back, how important it was, Frank, as you mentioned, talking to your board and whatnot, it's getting people future ready. Because we really started to institutionalize, I think, what's going to happen next, what's going to happen in the crypto market. You know, we looked at that and just said, it's not right for us. It's just something that, you know, it's better off done by other banks. But when we looked at cannabis, we were fortunate several of our board members, too, were users on the pain management side and medical applications, so they understood the marketplace. And it turned out to be a great transaction, great opportunity.
No, we can hear him.
It was going out a little.
Was it? Thanks. I don't have a tie.
What's a tie?
Oh, I have one at home, but
You know, I'm not going to say lucky, you were fortunate that you had the ability to take over the entire operation from Century, which came with Paul, who's really a leader in the banking space, Paul Evangelista. What's your advice to the other lenders in this room about entering the space and how to get that approval internally and what kind of systems they need to have and what kind of team they need to have?
Well, it comes down to your culture and your attitude towards things. As Jason mentioned, if you're going to do something, do it well. And you're better off going deep into it and understanding the nuances of it. It is not for the faint of heart. You're either all in or you're not in at all. The compliance risk is extraordinary. And if you think about it, even when it gets legalized or there's consistency at the legal and state level, there's going to be substantial compliance risk. We're fortunate we've gone through multiple regulatory exams, had a lot of conversations with the Federal Reserve on their view of it. Once they get actual authority over it, because right now they kind of default to FinCEN compliance. As long as you're following the right protocols and filing SARs and all those things, you're kind of okay. But they're worried about the illicit part of the market. People operating in the industry that really have bad backgrounds or ulterior motives, and they really feel like it's a high money laundering risk. So that they're really going to look for controls on the compliance side. And if any of the bankers in the room have ever looked at some of the fines that they hand out, lots of bank for compliance violations in the tens of millions of dollars. So you can lose more money on the compliance side than you can on credit. We understand what an asset's worth. You can look at probability of default, severity of default, and there's your credit exposure, whatnot. But on the cash management side, on the compliance side, that's where I think that you really have to understand what you're doing. Commit the right resources. A lot of people feel like they outsource that. From a banker standpoint, you can't outsource any risk. At the end of the day, it's your responsibility, and the regulator's going to hold you accountable. So you either do your homework and like any other industry, and if you're in it, get in it the right way.
So this is a question for both of you with respect to the last year or so, how it impacted the business. But Joe, when you took over the platform, April 22, it was a little different then than even in a year. This industry moves so fast. Tongue in cheek with my video, I mean, it really was like The Walking Dead back then. How did that change when you underwrote the deal and you looked at how we're going to approach this industry? Within a year, I mean, things changed, went from bad to worse. How did that change how you were going to do business with this new platform? Well,
we knew we were going into the early stages, and we decided we're going to enter the business at the first or second inning. There's going to be a long process going through this. If you look at other industries, I think some gentleman mentioned earlier today about the craft brewing business and how you go through traditional shakeouts. Lots of industries, they go through a startup phase, rapid expansion, and then you start to sort out the haves and the have-nots. Who's going to be a long-term survivor? So we went in there understanding that, what do the companies have the expertise to run a business? Because it is a business, it's a complicated one. It's got almost every aspect of risk to it that any major industry has, from not only the compliance but the science behind it, the branding behind it. You got to run it with the numbers and be prepared to work with razor-thin margins. Worrying about don't fall into a commodity trap because then it's really hard to make any type of money at all. So we really approached it methodically or in it for the long haul. And I said we looked at very relationship-driven, that we want to be your banker, not your depository institution, not your lender, but everything is a full-service bank. And that's really helping us, I think, for the long run, to build those relationships that will last when it becomes, 10 years from now, it should be, a fairly mature industry.
And did you find, even within that year, your discussions with the regulators when you took it over have changed, even within that year, that it's become more restrictive, or?
Yeah, and I don't think it's so much cannabis specific. I really think it's the cycles we go through. I mean, after 2008, you had the whole re-regulation of the industry. The most recent bank failures accelerated or exacerbated the regulatory environment. The regulators are trying to cool the economy with high interest rates. Now they're going to really cool the economy with much more restrictive on capital allocation methodologies and access to capital. And we're seeing that really affecting, a lot of industries, and especially cannabis, where a lot of the private equity money that flew in to support expansion and fund startup costs are kind of burned down now. And now, so it's getting more into hand-to-hand combat.
So Jason, going back, over a year, you really hunkered down, focused on the balance sheet. Can you share with the audience today the kind of steps you took, and that the kind of steps a lot of companies still need to take to survive, and you've really improved in the marketplace the perception of TerrAscend, its attractiveness, from an investor standpoint as well. And I know you're projecting to do 315 million or so this year, and about 61, 63 in EBITDA, which is up over your initial projections, which is rare. So I'd love to hear about how you really got down and the kind of some serious dramatic steps you took as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So say a year, maybe 15 months ago or so, we closed on our Gage transaction, our Michigan asset, and that was sort of the epicenter of the prime example of a market that was under extreme pressure, and we realized that we needed to take action, not just around that, but overall as a company. We decided that as much talk as we were hearing about how safe was this time, it was definitely happening and all of that, we decided that we really had to position ourselves as if we thought that absolutely zero was going to happen from that perspective. And that really, when you look at these companies, their businesses, it's really, they've got two huge expenses generally: their interest expense and also their taxes. And there's not much companies nowadays can do about their taxes, unless maybe some of these Supreme Court cases change any of that, or potential Supreme Court cases. But the other thing was your interest. That was the most sort of movable large object there, and it wasn't so. In terms of the undertaking we took to pay down about 50% of our debt, it wasn't even necessarily from the perspective of we need to have a better balance sheet and have less outstanding debt. It was more, we can't afford to pay all of this interest every quarter and still have there be cash flow left over. And that was the only thing that we defined really as us getting ourselves to sustainability without the need of any government reform, is to be fully cash flow positive. Not even just cash flow from operations positive, but free cash flow positive. And that's sort of the journey we've been on for the last 15 months.
How did you pay that down?
Yeah, well, first of all, we have an amazing other, second largest investor in the company, which is Canopy Growth. And they agreed last fall to equitize $90 million of their debt into, it was 23 million shares, which was converting. They converted at $5 a share, and our stock at the time was $2 and change, which was amazing. We announced this in December, and it was right before the bottom fell out with SAFE. People realized it wasn't going to happen, and I was so excited to make that announcement that they essentially turned almost $100 million into stock at double the price. And I think the stock maybe traded up for 5 minutes and then lost 50% of its value through the end of December. So that's the environment we're in from a capital markets perspective. Even we feel like we've made a ton of progress. In addition to that, we paid down. We had some debt outstanding against our Pennsylvania operations. We paid down something like $50 million against that loan over the last 8 months or so. And when we refinanced our Michigan debt, we had $55 million in debt outstanding. We only refinanced 25 of it. So it wasn't, again, it wasn't because we had any major aversion to keeping that debt on the balance sheet, because in actuality, our business starting last summer or 2 summers ago now started to get again more predictable, and the changes that we made definitely had their intended impact. Like in Q3, we flipped to being cash flow positive on an operational basis, and we have been ever since.
What kind of cuts did you make along the way to get there?
Yeah, great question. So Ziad Ghanem, our CEO, came from Walgreens, where he was for 17 years, and he ran several major pieces of their business. And I believe that in Walgreens, they have what they call the labor model, which is in retail, your labor as a percentage of sales at retail can't be more than 7%. That's sort of the standard. I think then they ended up lowering it over the last few years when times got tougher. Well, we went through all of our retail, we had, and we have now, say, 39 dispensaries, and our labor as a percentage of retail at the stores was like 12%. And we got ourselves down to 7% over the last 12 months or so. We also made an acquisition of 5 dispensaries. Something we realized in Michigan was, we had to bring down not just our operating expenses, but our cost of goods, meaning getting down our cost per pound to cultivate, which we did. But in addition, we realized that we had been looking at a few dispensary acquisitions, and we ended up acquiring a group of 5 dispensaries called Pinnacle. They were situated really well in terms of along the borders with the other states that don't have rec. But in addition, we realized if we bring those stores in with just that labor model, and we would have the ability to take out all of their other operating expenses because it would be absorbed in our state level infrastructure and footprint. So that's a way that we didn't necessarily take down absolute dollars, although we did, but as a percentage also of our revenue, we've been able to take down our overall OpEx by doing things like that. We actually, the last quarter that we did report, when we reported in August, we said that we were going to be able to get, with Maryland coming online, and we, as you know, have 4 stores there in a grow, we were going to be able to get our operating expenses from 36% of sales to 30%. We said we'd be able to do it exiting the year, where we pretty much hit that with our pre-announced upside and our investor day on Friday. We announced that we've hit, we've already hit that 30% of sales. So, and it's part of it is leveraging more sales. Part of it is we're continuing to attack expenses and see how we can do more with less, because there's no other way to do it. There was no, that was the reality of it.
Yeah, and it's kind of captain obvious, but people don't focus on that bottom line in this industry. I mean, it's been too much of a focus on planting the flag and growing and growing and growing. But you did one other thing, which, I talked about pioneers and trailblazers, and you really are a trailblazer in this respect and others. But talk about the TSX. Because now there's other people jumping on that train.
Yep, they're coming.
And you were the first.
Yep, we're happy to blaze the trail for them. We've had not a major relationship, but we've known the TSX folks for longer maybe than most of the other U.S. operators, because, as I mentioned before, we started in Canada, and we're pretty much the only Canadian LP that completely pivoted into the U.S. But I'm always sitting and, from being a fund manager and also, being involved in the TerrAscend business, constantly sort of brainstorming of different, sort of different structures on ways to raise money and all of that. And 2 years ago, we were able to come up with a structure where Canopy Growth, who was a Canadian LP and did not do anything, illegal in the U.S., we were able to come up with a structure that the TSX signed off on, where they lent TerrAscend money, and we were able to show that it wasn't making its way back down into the U.S., other than if it was an allowable transaction. And that was, sort of huge for us, because that debt that I mentioned, I mean, it was, it's like 6.1%. It was much better than anybody, especially now, is getting out of in the overall market. And it was because Canopy had a lower cost of capital than we did, and we were able to essentially figure out how to get the full advantage of that. Well, sort of that relationship with the TSX, a year and a half or so later, when Canopy announced that they were going to step into their U.S. operations, this was about a year ago, and that they had figured out with the TSX that would be on sides with them. And when we learned about the structure, we realized that we could do the same exact thing, which was putting in place a ring fence structure that is essentially the TSX they evaluate your clean business, meaning your non-US plant touching business. And if that business qualifies for listing, then they'll let you put all of your US plant touching business into a ring-fenced subsidiary. It wasn't a huge lift for us because we were structured in a similar way to satisfy their original request around the loans. And they just, once we started talking to them about that about a year ago, they were very encouraging, and it seemed to us like a business that they want to get into. And they, maybe they felt like we would be an obvious candidate for it. And I don't know, maybe we might be slightly less likely to embarrass them than maybe some of the other operators that are out there. I don't know. I mean, I guess my point is we've had a great relationship with them. They've been very, very, accommodative, and we just, our investor day last Friday, we were able to host it at the market site up there in Canada. So it was a lot of fun.
So, yeah, I mean, the point is you took some major steps, you took some innovative steps to help, especially with your stock, and create, hopefully, future liquidity, which will lead to another topic. We'll talk about M&A, things of that nature as well.
Right, but maybe I did sort of leave out a couple of the things that you folks might want to know in terms of, did it help with the liquidity? Did it help with U.S. custody? Things like that. We had said in the beginning, our view was, if we were on a larger exchange with access to more, participants, then, and as long as we continue to execute, that those extra eyes should help by driving more volume. And essentially we felt like maybe we were like a tree that fell in the woods and nobody heard, with our good results, and we wanted to be on a real exchange that just had much more money sort of behind it. But we didn't know really where that extra volume would come from. And then the number one question people would ask is, well, what about U.S. Institutional custody? Because a couple of years ago, Pershing blocked, and most of the U.S. firms, brokerage firms, blocked the ability for many institutional investors to hold U.S. cannabis stocks. On that, we said, honestly, we don't know. Hope so. We'll see what happens, but we still think there'll be more volume. Well, the answer to that is that U.S. custody has, it seems like, largely been solved. Morgan Stanley, Pershing, who's owned by Bank of New York, Cowen, several other firms have taken us off their blocked list or their barred security list pursuant to their MRB or marijuana-related business policy. And to tell you the truth, we stopped checking. I was keeping a list of all the firms that took us off, and we stopped checking because I haven't heard of anybody where we're on the list anymore. So that has been a huge positive. You wouldn't know from our stock price performance necessarily. It's sort of like everybody's number one question was solved, sort of to the affirmative and in a positive way, and everybody just moved on to everything else. And there's a lot of stuff going on in the world, but that's been a huge positive. And overall, our volume has increased. It's up about 300% or 400% from when we listed on July 4th. We called that our Independence Day because we felt like that was the culmination of all those things we did, and we were finally independent of the need for reform. But volume's up 300% or 400% from there. But I think the less skewed way to look at it is what our volume was before the HHS DEA potential rescheduling news, and at that point our volume was up 150% versus prior to listing. The other MSOs, their volume was down 18%, and the S&P was down 18% over that same period. And the bid-ask spread closed significantly. So, I would say the listing has checked the boxes on all of that. And we've said, like we said, when we first announced we were listing, we hope that this could be a pathway for other operators to go down, and we didn't mind being the guinea pigs.
Okay. Now, Joe, you and I have talked about your vision about trying to institutionalize banking for cannabis, and to do so even on a more national platform. James on the earlier panel really talked about borrowers' criteria. We don't need to go through that, but one of the things this industry is lacking in the banking space is is most of the lending, unless it's private really, is asset-backed. And there's a lot of companies that don't own the real estate that have solid retail operations but need that capital. What's your thoughts on that? I mean, is that really possible to move away, not move away, but add the more cash flow, traditional lending to the cannabis space? And when do you think you get comfortable doing that?
I think we're seeing it now. I mean, day one, you got to look at it's kind of a startup industry. It's blossoming from the bottom up, and it's really funded by, private equity or a pure equity capital. And now it's so that when banks get into it, you look at hard balance sheet lending, hard assets, and what would happen in the event of default. How would you repay your loan? As companies mature, I think the industry is now probably 25, 30% cash flow positive, and we see more and more companies maturing and getting from the investment stage, not maturing. And I think the banking world is going to migrate. I mean, as a banker, I'd rather see cash flow to pay the loan than have to liquidate an asset. So that we're looking at that. So when we came into the business early on, I look at it kind of like stage one. It's got to be asset-based. What's the hard collateral value? Gets our regulators comfortable, our board comfortable, our investors comfortable, and protects ourselves in the event that as we go through kind of the maturation of the industries in a shakeout. Because in any industry, there are going to be some people that don't make it. And as you can judge from Jason's comments, it's a complicated business, just like any other major enterprise. And it takes a good management team to understand and continue to evolve with the marketplace. So we are looking at now that we're seeing more and more companies becoming very strongly cash flow positive, to the point they're paying nice dividends, they're paying down debt significantly. So I see ourselves now looking and say, okay, what phase is that enterprise in, and how do we shift from collateral reliance to cash flow reliance? So to me, it's just a matter of time. And you look at where you're operating now, and the cash flow becomes strong, it's predictable, sustainable. So that I think that the industry itself will continue to move along and progress that way. And it's getting more competitive. Rates are coming down from a lending standpoint, and that's why we look at it as really full service banking. How do we provide treasury products? How do anti-fraud? I mean, fraud's everywhere. Every industry, every household you think of. So what are the tools between Positive Pay and online treasury management systems that we should be applying to this industry? No different than any other Fortune 500 company.
So are there and a question for both of you, the markets to expand in, Jason, where are you looking to expand it? Yep. And Joe, are you still looking to build Needham's platform really into being like the national cannabis lender?
Well, I'll go first. I mean, when you look at the industry and how it evolves, I kind of look at it as 3 tiers. You get your single point operator. If they do a good job, good merchandising, and will be around for a long time from a small business, middle market company. Then you get your more regional players that be more on a statewide level, fully integrated. And then you have your national MSOs. They're going to be the consolidators. So we looked early on and said, if we don't play a major role with the multi-state operators, they're going to end up coming in and acquiring some of our clients, and we'll be on the outside looking in from a relationship standpoint. So we made we saw a big void. Because we always say we like to do the best of a big bank when it comes to products and services and expertise, but the best of a small bank too. You can pick up a phone. I mean, my cell phone's on our website, and people use it, and we're accessible, and we can make decisions and move on. And that's kind of the niche we see. That we picked up a great team from the Century Bank. We've complemented it with other people that have big bank experience, but really understand what we want to do, how we want to do it, and do it right with a lot of bureaucracy. And the model works.
Yeah. And maybe I could just, before I answer it personally, I really think that you guys have been a leader in the space. And somebody just mentioned when Paul Evangelista walked by earlier, that guy is he described him as fearless. Usually you don't want to hear that.
They must have driven with him.
But right, exactly. But fearless in a positive way, and I do thank you guys for leading here, because everybody else, for most banks, it's just they don't want to deal with the hassle. They, I don't know, maybe they've got their own stigma in their head of the people that operate in this industry, and I think that personally, the firms and the banks that stand with the industry when things are not that easy, those are going to be the ones that hopefully the industry remembers when things get easier.
Right.
You know?
And that's what relationships are all about, right? You were there in the tough times. You just kind of, you know, we always say don't shoot the messenger unless they're late. You know, if there's a problem, let's roll up our sleeves, figure it out. And it's like any business in any other industry, except being the relatively newness in the scale. I mean, you think about other industries, how long it's taken to get to this size revenues on a national level. It's remarkable. But you know, you're known by the company you keep, and we're really excited to be, you know, partners with a lot of people in this room that, you know, they understand what they're doing. They've been built businesses in different industries, and, you know, we want to be part of all that. When you mentioned about Paul being fearless, it's like we built a platform that has good guide rails, right? So we know what we want to do on the credit side. We know what we want to do on the compliance side, so we can move faster.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So
what was your original question?
Well, look, you've gone, you know, very heavy Maryland,
Yeah.
Pennsylvania, New Jersey.
Yeah.
You're very bullish on those states. What other states do you think are next for TerrAscend?
Yeah, for us, I would say, first of all, there are some amazing acquisition opportunities. And because we're in just 5 states and a lot of our other, well-financed or cash flowing competitors, most of them are in a lot of those states. So at these super low valuations, there's not a whole lot of competitive tension in terms of bidders. At least we haven't found it. Like that's how we were able to sort of drop into Maryland and hit the 4 dispensary cap. In the final days of medical before it turned rec on July 1st. In terms of the other states, we really are looking to be as opportunistic as we can. So we're not locked in. I feel like anytime I've ever been like, oh man, you know, we got to have something in this state or something like that, then it doesn't give us the ability to get the best deals that are available out there. Generally, what we've been saying and the way we view it is like, we're interested in everything from Michigan east, you know, figures through Ohio, and then up and down the East Coast. So that would, sort of put a decent sized universe out there. But then maybe, on top of that, probably as we would rank attractiveness of any potential assets, if the state is already rec or is a little bit more of a mature rec market, those are going to be a little bit, further to the bottom of the list versus, all these states that are like just either newly rec or just starting now, i.e. Ohio, Georgia. Georgia, we have to see. Right now, there's super low THC caps. But probably the only market that I would say on the East Coast that we are not interested in is New York, my old home state. And that's because, in my view, we have regulators that are, I don't know, the enemy of, capitalism or the enemy of or just they are, in my view, it's not, I can't sort of as a fiduciary invest a large amount of money in a state that, doesn't do things, in a competent or, I don't know. Right. Obviously, I got some emotions here.
It's not a good return on investment.
Yeah, it's not a good return on investment.
Well, this is just a casual conversation.
Yes.
You can speak openly.
Yeah. So,
Tell us what you really think.
Anyway, yeah, I'm a New Yorker my whole life. I grew up in Rockland County in New York. Fully went to all public schools and all that. Wasn't like I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth. And I never minded paying the New York state income tax. My whole family, I have a lot of family in Florida, and we had a vacation place there, but we never moved down there full time. I kept justifying in my head that it's like, there's more business here. I'm gonna, I'll make up for it that way, and I gotta live where I wanna live. And when the New York program, over the last 2 years, the rollout of the New York program made me realize that I wouldn't want to give the New York State another penny of my income taxes. And because they tried to limit the pie for a certain group of businesses, and it's amazing to me that they didn't know this because it's like in history, it's always this way. But when you try to limit the pie for a certain group, all you do is limit the size of the pie, That's exactly what's happened here, and they've heard all the stakeholders. They've heard the what's called the court applicants, which are the social equity applicants. They've heard the state residents that program should have collected probably, I don't know, $400 million in taxes already, and instead they've probably collected, $10 million in taxes. So they hurt everybody, and I just couldn't, I couldn't live there anymore. So we moved over the summer to Florida.
So tell us how you feel about Massachusetts.
Massachusetts, I've never been involved in, but
But is it in seriousness? Is it a state you're looking at more seriously?
It's really we try to be super, super disciplined. We've seen tons of really good deals at super low multiples, but it's like, when you think about how it all plays out in real life, if every state we add is going to take up a chunk of our bandwidth and take away from something else. And that's generally our view on Massachusetts. It's sort of one of the most mature states on the East Coast because it's already rec. And if we've only got so many slots that we can fill up, it hasn't been at the top of our list.
Well, it's certainly not as bad as New York, and but I have the privilege of closing the conference out with an interview with Commissioner Roy. We're going to talk about the CCC because some states are only as good as their leadership, and Massachusetts is going through a bit of turmoil at that, and we're going to have a candid conversation about that.
Mm-hmm. Similar to New York in terms of turmoil with Governor Cuomo leaving. Mm-hmm. I think that Governor Hochul should stop, sticking her head in the sand and making it like there's nothing wrong in New York because there's something majorly wrong in New York. And, I feel like most people probably don't even know that New York decided that it would be in the best interest of the program and all the social equity applicants that are out there that they only allow outdoor or greenhouse weed in the rec program. Indoor weed, which many or most consider to be of the highest quality, not allowed right now.
That's because they have the experience.
Right. It's like Governor Hochul coming out and saying, "Hey, we're going to build this huge auto industry, but you can only make hatchbacks. That's it." So clearly I'm expressing my frustration, but what's the saying? I love New York, and I really am. It's so disappointing how they've hurt every single stakeholder in the state.
So in the interest of time, let me ask both of you about your insight, your viewpoint on some of the macro issues that we're all facing, particularly the 280E. We talked about over competition, over tax, but let's talk about the SAFER Act.
Yeah.
I don't view this as a panacea, but I'm very curious, and I'm sure other lenders in this space are as well, Joe. Do you really see that as a positive, or do you see it as a negative? Because you're gaining terrific market share with the way things are. There's certainly a positive in the SAFER Act with respect to payments, things of that nature. Yeah. But there are a lot of banks that are banking cannabis today. So, how do you look at the SAFER Act? And I'd like to hear from you too as well, Jason.
Yeah, I always think about careful what you wish for, right? Because there's always those unintended consequences, especially when it comes to regulators. Regulations that they may think they're doing something good here, but the adverse impact could be widespread somewhere else. So I think the SAFER Act is a step in the right direction. The real issue is legalization and to make it consistent with every other industry. It's an industry that will always be banked with care. So it's not like all of a sudden, I told the regulators from day one, if you want to launder money, it's a great industry. But you got to have the controls in place, understand speeds of sale, understand who you're doing business with. Know your customers, really important. But it's just the same way in any other major industry, right? It's leadership, it's people, it's how well they understand how to run a business and deal with an ever-changing environment. I can't think of an industry that's not going through significant change. Whether it's from technology, from regulation, from higher interest rates, you've got to be adaptive, right? And cannabis is no different along those lines. So I think getting regulatory consistency at the federal level is important. I don't think anything's going to get done before the election. I think there's going to be a lot of campaigning and saying, this sounds great, I'm for this, I'm for that, but I don't see much getting done anywhere, especially when you look at the overregulation on every industry and trying to sort through what the role of government should be and whatnot. It's going to take a little bit longer to get there, but yeah, I'm very, very confident that the ship is sailing. It's going to be legal. The question is when and how at the federal level.
Jason? And you're really tied in on various levels with insight into Washington on some of these aspects, so I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
Yes, I think safer. I think there's a decent chance it happens. I mean, with the potential, rescheduling, I think that is so much bigger than safer, right? I mean, I think the major advantage of safer is there should be the ability to take credit cards, but there doesn't seem to be that much else that's really, game changing the way 280E going away would be with rescheduling. I mean, rescheduling would sort of be Goldilocks, I think, to a certain extent. I was disappointed to hear that you don't think anything's going to happen before the election, because I've been sort of hoping that the Biden administration wants to use this as a way to get him reelected.
Yeah, I guess everybody can guess that. My thought is that they're going to talk about it, but nothing's really going to get done.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, and we're seeing that from a lot of different perspectives.
Yeah. So, that's what I think on that. I mean, there's also, I think that the HHS news, the rescheduling news, actually put a little pressure on Congress, because a lot of folks in Congress don't. The reason SAFE hasn't passed in the past is it's not because there's so many opponents, it's because nobody cares enough.
Right.
And if Schumer thinks that this rescheduling is going to steal the football from him, and he's not going to be able to get any credit for it, then it means that it should apply pressure to get things moving. I'm not sure that that's what moves SAFER along to the furthest point it's been at, but I think that it didn't hurt. And as I alluded to, there might be some other court cases that also might apply pressure to Congress if they think that maybe the Supreme Court's going to legalize cannabis if Congress doesn't do it.
Right. Well, there are different avenues to go when you can't get it through the legislative. You go through the court system.
And even to apply pressure to the legislative side to do their job.
Yeah. But look, the SAFER doesn't make oversaturation go away, overregulation go away. I mean, those issues are still going to, and lack of capital. Those issues are still going to be there.
Yeah.
Whether or not, Garland comes out with the Garland memo, and some people say it's already written. I question that, but that will clarify, because if it's rescheduled, from 1 to 3, it's medical. So the question is, well, what does that mean for adult use? And that's where people think that Garland will come out and clarify that we're not going to prosecute as long as you're licensed. Same thing that Cole memo did, and the positive effects that had at the time. So there's still open issues on all this. You mentioned credit cards. It's great for banks to take them. It's also up to MasterCard, Visa, or Amex to allow it.
Right.
And that may not go away until it's federally legal. So there's still a whole host of issues. This is not the end all. The topics that we've talked today, and then we're going to have a terrific CEO panel next. I mean, these issues are still out there. There's the expression, time flies when you're having a good time. I've really enjoyed this. I can't believe we're almost at the end of an hour. I want to thank you. This has been terrific. It really has. I hope the audience found it enlightening and really gave insight into each of your respective companies. You continue to do great things in the industry, and we're very appreciative of that. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed it, Frank.
Jason.